Not every success story follows a clean arc from struggle to triumph. Some unfold slowly, shaped by invisible costs that fame cannot erase. Michael J. Fox is often remembered as the embodiment of optimism, quick-witted, energetic, and endlessly likable. For decades, audiences associated him with speed, charm, and a sense of effortlessness that made success look natural. But behind that image was a life defined by pressure, fear, and a long confrontation with a disease that began altering his future before most people noticed anything was wrong. This is not a story about sudden collapse or dramatic downfall. It is a story about gradual loss experienced under bright lights, about maintaining momentum while parts of life quietly slip away. It examines how ambition, silence, and physical decline intersected inside a man expected to remain upbeat no matter the cost. And it asks a deeper question. What happens when the very qualities that make someone successful also prevent them from slowing down when they most need to? Long before becoming a recognizable face on television and film, Michael J. Fox was simply a teenager chasing an uncertain dream. Growing up in Canada, he felt disconnected from traditional paths and convinced himself that acting was not a hobby but a necessity. Against advice and without a safety net, he dropped out of high school and moved to the United States, believing opportunity would meet determination halfway. What followed was not immediate success, but isolation. He lived alone in a cramped, deteriorating apartment in Hollywood, surrounded by uncertainty and financial instability. Meals were improvised and repetitive, often limited to the cheapest food available. There were moments when desperation replaced pride, and survival became the only focus. Fox later spoke openly about scavenging for food and navigating daily life with almost no money, not as a dramatic confession, but as a factual recollection. These years were marked by fear of failure, fear of going home defeated, and fear that the gamble he had taken would permanently close doors rather than open them. The psychological strain of those early years cannot be overstated. With no family nearby and little external reassurance, Fox lived in a constant state of uncertainty. He took extreme measures to stay afloat, sometimes renting furniture under false names or delaying payment simply to buy time. Bills accumulated, and eviction was a persistent threat. Each day required strategic avoidance, avoiding landlords, avoiding hunger, and avoiding the crushing realization that his plan might not work. Yet beneath the anxiety was a stubborn belief that something would eventually shift. This belief was not rooted in logic or evidence, but in persistence. Acting auditions came and went, often without response, but Fox continued. He treated discouragement as temporary, even when circumstances suggested otherwise. That mindset kept him going long enough for opportunity to arrive. When it did, it came abruptly and without transition, leaving no space to process what was happening. Survival mode did not end when success began. It simply changed form. The turning point arrived with Family Ties, a role that transformed Fox from an unknown actor into a household name almost overnight. The success was immediate and overwhelming, especially for someone who had been preparing to abandon the dream altogether. But instead of relief, the role introduced a new level of pressure. Almost simultaneously, Fox was cast in Back to the Future, creating a scheduling conflict that pushed him into an extreme routine. For months, his life became a cycle of exhaustion: television during the day, feature film work at night, and sleep reduced to fragments. He often worked close to 20 hours a day, sustained by adrenaline and the fear that slowing down might cost him everything. What looked like a golden moment from the outside was physically and mentally punishing. The foundation of his success was not balance or stability, but urgency. He was afraid that if he paused, the momentum would disappear as quickly as it had arrived. This relentless pace had consequences that were not immediately visible. Fox became accustomed to pushing through fatigue, ignoring physical signals, and prioritizing performance over well-being. The habits formed during this period would later complicate his response to illness. Success taught him that endurance was rewarded and that vulnerability was a liability. As his public image solidified, expectations followed. He was seen as fast, confident, and dependable, a performer whose energy never faltered. That image left little room for uncertainty or limitation. When the next phase of his life arrived, it collided directly with this expectation. In the early 1990s, while still young and professionally secure, Fox noticed a small but unsettling change, a tremor in his finger. It was subtle, easily dismissed, but persistent. Unlike exhaustion, this felt unfamiliar. Medical evaluations confirmed what he feared, but could not prepare for. Parkinson's disease. Progressive, incurable, and unpredictable. The diagnosis reframed everything he thought he knew about time, control, and identity. Receiving such news before the age of 30 altered Fox's understanding of his future overnight. Doctors explained that the disease would worsen, eventually interfering with movement, speech, and daily function. For an actor whose craft depended on timing and physical control, the implications were devastating. Beyond the professional threat was a deeper psychological shock. Fox realized that success had not insulated him from vulnerability. Fame suddenly felt transactional, as if it had come with an invisible price. His initial response was not acceptance, but secrecy. For years, he told almost no one, choosing instead to manage symptoms privately while continuing to work. Medication became a tool not for comfort, but for concealment. He learned to time doses carefully to appear steady on set, even as his body struggled outside of view. Maintaining normalcy became a second full-time job. The effort required constant calculation and discipline, reinforcing the idea that survival depended on appearing unchanged. Living in secrecy took an emotional toll that accumulated quietly. The strain of hiding symptoms, maintaining performance, and processing fear alone created a sense of isolation. To manage the anxiety he refused to confront, Fox turned to alcohol. What began as a coping mechanism gradually became routine. Drinking offered temporary relief, dulling intrusive thoughts about the future and easing the constant vigilance required to hide his condition. On set, medication controlled tremors. Off-set, alcohol softened reality. The combination allowed him to function publicly while unraveling privately. Over time, the behavior normalized. He convinced himself that he remained productive, present, and in control. But addiction rarely announces itself as chaos. It often presents as maintenance. Family life began to suffer, and moments that should have been meaningful slipped away. Fox later reflected on this period with regret, recognizing how absence can exist even when someone is physically present. The breaking point arrived without spectacle. One night, Fox passed out at home, a beer spilling onto the floor as his body went still. His wife, Tracy Pollan, found him there. There was no confrontation or ultimatum. The moment spoke for itself. For the first time, Fox saw his situation clearly. The disease was no longer the only thing he was hiding from. Sobriety followed, not as a dramatic transformation, but as a difficult reckoning. Without alcohol, there was no barrier between him and Parkinson's. Fear surfaced fully, unfiltered. Questions about decline, identity, and relevance demanded attention. Recovery was not comforting. It was honest. Choosing sobriety meant facing reality without distraction and relying on support rather than denial. Tracy's presence became foundational, offering steadiness rather than control. This period marked a shift. Fox stopped trying to outrun his circumstances and began acknowledging them directly. Despite the diagnosis and personal challenges, Fox did not immediately retreat from acting. Instead, he entered another productive chapter with Spin City. The role required sharp dialogue and sustained energy, and Fox delivered, earning awards and reaffirming his capabilities. Yet behind the scenes, everything was carefully managed. Schedules revolved around medication. Adjustments were made quietly. Eventually, he disclosed his illness to cast members, not as a statement, but as a necessity. As symptoms progressed, the workload became unsustainable. Stepping away from the series was emotionally complex. Acting had been his primary language, and leaving felt like losing a form of expression. Still, he continued appearing in selective roles designed around his limitations. These performances carried a different weight, less about speed, more about presence. They reflected a performer adapting rather than resisting, choosing honesty over illusion. Over time, Parkinson's advanced beyond movement. Memory lapses emerged, lines became harder to retain, and speech required increased effort. The realization came quietly, without denial left to soften it. Continuing to act would mean shifting the burden onto others. Choosing to step back was not surrender, but recognition. Physical pain became a constant companion, and unpredictability replaced control. Falls resulted in injuries, each one reinforcing limitations. A broken arm marked a psychological low point. For the first time, Fox admitted that optimism alone could not resolve everything. Some suffering resisted reframing. Medical complications followed, including spinal surgery and rehabilitation that required relearning how to walk. Time spent in a wheelchair altered his sense of autonomy. He described feeling invisible, moved without agency. Even after recovery, setbacks continued. Creative outlets disappeared one by one, leaving writing as the primary means of expression. In writing, Fox found clarity rather than escape. His memoirs documented reality without romanticizing it. Advocacy became another focus. Through testimony and fundraising, he shifted Parkinson's research by emphasizing collaboration and patient involvement. He spoke not as a celebrity, but as someone living the condition daily. Early optimism predicted a cure within his lifetime. That timeline proved unrealistic. Yet rather than bitterness, Fox reframed success. Progress replaced cure as the goal. Visibility replaced silence. Dignity replaced denial. His foundation changed how the disease is discussed, giving patients recognition rather than pity. As physical strength declined, insight deepened. Reflecting on childhood and family, he recognized that performance had always been about movement and engagement rather than applause. Parkinson's did not erase identity. It clarified it. As Parkinson's progressed, daily life became structured around limitation rather than ambition. Tasks that once required no thought now demanded planning and patience. Movement was unpredictable, balance unreliable, and energy inconsistent. Fox learned that independence was no longer guaranteed, and accepting help became unavoidable. This shift challenged his identity more than public recognition ever had. He was no longer defined by speed or productivity, but by endurance. The disease forced a slower relationship with time, where progress was measured not in achievements, but in stability. Some days offered control, others demanded surrender. There was no clear rhythm, only adjustment. This stage of life stripped away performance and left only presence. Pain became a constant rather than an interruption. Stiffness, fatigue, and muscle rigidity shaped his physical reality. Falls were no longer rare accidents but recurring threats. Each injury carried psychological weight, reinforcing vulnerability. Fox acknowledged that optimism, once his defining trait, could not erase physical suffering. Instead of reframing pain into motivation, he allowed himself to recognize it plainly. This honesty marked a turning point. Accepting discomfort without narrative or lesson became an act of realism. It was no longer about winning or losing, but about existing truthfully within limitation. Medical complications added new layers of uncertainty. Spinal surgery addressed one issue while introducing others. Rehabilitation was slow and demanding, requiring relearning movements once instinctive. Time spent in a wheelchair altered how Fox perceived the world and how the world responded to him. Loss of agency was deeply unsettling. Dependence replaced autonomy, even temporarily. These experiences reshaped his understanding of dignity, making it clear that visibility and voice matter even when physical control is reduced. Creative outlets continued to disappear. Music, drawing, and physical expression faded as coordination declined. Acting, once central, became unsustainable. Writing remained. Through words, Fox could still structure thought, examine memory, and document reality. Writing was not escape, but record. It allowed him to process fear, regret, humor, and acceptance without performance. His books became reflections rather than solutions, focused on clarity instead of inspiration. Advocacy replaced ambition as his primary public role. Through research funding and policy engagement, Fox redirected influence toward impact. He emphasized collaboration, data sharing, and patient-driven science. While early optimism predicted a cure within his lifetime, reality proved more complex. Progress occurred, but not resolution. Rather than withdrawing, Fox adjusted expectations. Success became incremental. Visibility became victory. Public perception shifted alongside his openness. Parkinson was no longer hidden behind smiles or controlled appearances. Fox rejected simplified inspiration narratives, choosing accuracy over comfort. He acknowledged frustration, loss, and fear without apology. This transparency resonated with patients who felt unseen. By refusing to sanitize illness, he restored dignity to those living with it daily. Reflection on childhood and family revealed deeper motivations. Reviewing home videos filmed by his father, Fox recognized that performance had always been personal. Movement, energy, and expression were ways of engaging with life, not chasing approval. This realization reframed loss. Parkinson's had not taken his purpose. It clarified it. Courage in Fox's story is not found in overcoming disease, but in refusing to disappear because of it. It exists in adaptation, honesty, and sustained presence. Living fully no longer meant control or certainty, but participation. The disease reshaped his body, but not his voice. Michael J. Fox's life does not offer a perfect ending. There is no cure, no reversal, no final triumph. Instead, there is continuity. A man learning how to live honestly within